Today on How to Drink, I am making real Prohibition-era gin, bootlegger gin, using notes from a real, actual, professional bootlegger, exactly as it would have been made in the 1920s, in the Roaring '20s in New York City, and then I'm going to compare it to modern gin. And what I found out is that there's this book called Lost Recipes of Prohibition, written by Matthew Rowley. It's kind of out of print. I think it came out in 2015, and I don't know if it's been reprinted since then. Matthew Rowley wrote this book because somehow or another somebody gave to him what appeared to be a collection of old German poetry. It turns out it was actually the secret recipes, formulas that this pharmacist Victor Lyon had been recording throughout Prohibition. All of his recipes for bootleg liquor, imitation spirits, liquors, liqueurs, everything. All of it in what appeared to be some particular German poet's poetry. And I think he turned out to be a bad guy. I think he lost a lot of popularity in World War II, actually. You might ask yourself, why would this guy write all of this down? Why would he take such copious, studious notes? And the answer, I think, is because that's what pharmacists did. Pharmacists, especially at that time, were in the habits of publishing pharmacopoeia, manuals for other pharmacists, because that is how they became big deals, famous in the world of pharmacy. And you can buy those today, and they're very, very useful in flavor science, and particularly in my efforts to sometimes recreate lost recipes. There are bottlers' formularies, various pharmacists for pharmacopoeia, that's the term, I believe, from the 1890s, 1900s, all of those things. And I think that he was just sort of, as a force of habit, writing all this stuff down. He probably also needed the recipes for his own purposes, but amazingly, they did survive, they have been authenticated, and they are legit, and they are in this book. So happily, the hard part was actually already done for me. The research was done. It's occurring to me right now that this is kind of part 3 of an unintentional trilogy, because I did an episode on Texas Guinan, hugely influential speakeasy hostess. She was famous, probably the most famous woman in America for a period of 10 or 15 years. What I uncovered from researching that is that probably the most popular drink in speakeasies, at least in the New York City area, was a gin buck, which is nothing more than a combination of ginger ale and gin, maybe a twist of lime. And I do mean ginger ale. There is a modern trend to assume that a gin buck must surely have involved the hotter, the more spicy ginger beer, or Caribbean-style ginger beer that you might be thinking of. But in fact, no, it would have been ginger ale, and it would have been specifically Canada Dry ginger ale, which was at that time a newfangled type of ginger ale that really took the world by storm, and I think became very popular because of its utility in mixing with gin. And so I did an episode where I hunted down and recreated the original 1920s recipe for Canada Dry ginger ale. Because of course it doesn't taste anything like it does today back then, right? What was it? It must have been different. So I did that, and that was part 2 of this apparent trilogy, this unintentional trilogy. And now at long last, thanks to what we're going to do in this episode today, we can say this is part 3. We have the gin, we've got the ginger ale, we've got the speakeasy hostess. We could finally have a Texas Guinan gin buck. So I'm very excited about this. I've been working on this for a while. But before I move on, I do want to say, what is bathtub gin? You may have heard of the term bathtub gin. You probably have some mental image of how, I don't know. I actually don't know what you're picturing when you picture bathtub gin. It's very possible that you don't know anything about how gin is made, and there's nothing wrong with that, but so I don't know what you're picturing. I think that we don't really know the exact etymology of the term bathtub gin. Here's what I can tell you about bathtubs and gin. Gin starts its life as a high-proof neutral grain spirit that then goes through one of a couple of different versions of an infusion process in which it is converted from what might otherwise be considered something like vodka into gin, which is flavored vodka. A bathtub is a human-sized water storage vessel, often made out of enameled cast iron or possibly a simple metal tub that stores water temporarily for washing in. How one would make gin in a bathtub is interesting, because you cannot distill in a bathtub. A bathtub is not a still. You could, in theory, use a bathtub as a temporary container to pour a bunch of high-proof spirits into, and then add your compounding agents, your spices, your essential oils, whatever you happen to be using, mix them up, and then somehow, I don't know, ladle it back out, I guess. That would be how you make your gin. This book posits what I think is a much more likely solution, which is that many people had a little home cottage industry making a little bit of bathtub gin at home. and you would mix it in a big glass carboy, which is a kind of a glass bottle, and you, at the end of doing your infusion, you need to deproof your spirits down to drinking heat, and you can't fit that carboy under your sink faucet, but you could fit it under your bathtub faucet, and so that was probably where bathtub gin comes from. Or, I don't know, maybe people just had big vats of high-proof spirits in their bathtubs, mixing it up with all of the sloughed-off skin and soap scum and everything in there, and it doesn't conjure a pretty image, but I don't think that's what it was. There is one thing that we gotta get straight to about Bathtub Gin, about Victor Lyon, the bootlegger. Victor Lyon is a real professional bootlegger supplying speakeasies in New York City, as far as we can tell, and maybe even areas beyond that. But he is not fermenting his own mashes, as far as we can tell, and I think that that was very common as a practice. You have this mental image, maybe, from Prohibition, of moonshiners, particularly down in Appalachia, taking their corn and making it from scratch with water, malting it, fermenting the mash, and putting it into a still from start to finish, right? But I don't think that that's what was going on in the cities from what I have read. And I don't know how much start to finish fermentation, grain to bottle spirits making was going on. And certainly a pharmacist would be a fool to approach it that way, because I'm sure all throughout Prohibition, Victor Lyon had access to high-proof spirits. You need it for the work he was doing. Somehow or another, he was getting this stuff. But from other places that I have read, I think it was somewhat common practice to farm out the creation of your base high-proof spirits, maybe like a cottage industry of lots of people with little stills in their kitchens that they were running at night or whatever. I think that that's actually what Al Capone was doing. Then you collect it all, you mix it all together. Now you've got your high-proof spirit that you then turn into whiskey, you turn into gin, you turn into whatever by changing it around. The point is that high-proof spirits in the world that we are delving into, bootlegging, prohibition, speakeasies, is a product input, an input, I think that's the term here. I didn't take economics at all. I'm not an industrialist, it's an input. Where we get it from probably doesn't matter, and it certainly didn't matter to Victor. He didn't describe making it from scratch ever. What we're talking about is, what do you do with it once you got it? You're turning it into the gin. That's what you're doing with it. So nothing I'm doing here is going to involve fermentation, and as a result of that, and this is very important, it is safe. If I were fermenting from scratch, I would need to be a lot more careful about running this through a still, because there would be bad things in that fermented mash that, if I took the wrong parts of the output from the still, I could concentrate into levels that are at least very unpleasant, if not dangerous. And at any rate, it wasn't part of the process. It's not how it worked. It just isn't how it worked. Let's talk about those two recipes. There are basically two approaches to making gin. There's what you would call compounded gin, and then redistilled gin. In both cases, you have to start from high-proof spirits. Compounded gin is done by taking high-proof spirits, steeping botanicals in them, filtering it off, and saying, there's your gin. Redistilled gin involves some version of a very similar process, if I'm honest, and then putting it through a still to clean it out so that it's crystal clear and pretty. And also, that direct infusion without that distillation step, you might end up with some off or heavy or less than desirable flavors. Well, I guess that's actually what I should say there, is that that's like rectified compounded gin, which is the two recipes that we have here. I think that industrially, which is an unpleasant term to use here, but like professionally, in the places that make the gin, the more common and ideal method involves a pot still that has usually an onion head, and I think that that's where they set a gin basket, it's called. It's a suspended basket that hangs out above, in the headspace, above the boil chamber, and it contains a bunch of botanicals, and your ethanol vapor come up and stick to it, and then they kind of reflux off of it, and that's the process by which they infuse. I think you could also put it into the vapor path elsewhere, depending on your particular gin setup. Somewhere in the vapor path is the idea. So the first recipe I'm going to make from this book is the compounded gin, and he has that kind of two ways. There is the very first listing for this stuff, it's just juniper berries in ethanol. Extract the juniper, add it to your spirits, bada bing, bada boom, sell it for a profit. That's the first one that's in there. But right below that, he has sort of what I think must have been his better version, his version 2.0, upgraded compounded gin. Felt like that would be the more interesting one to make. And I'm going to make that in the lab. So I need 12 grams of juniper. I need 0.7 grams caraway seed. We're just keeping the same ratios he used. 6-8, close enough. And I don't think I'm even gonna like the caraway. And it's making me wonder, I've never drank gin from this time frame. I have seen other reports, and I think the other recipe also calls for caraway. I haven't gotten to it yet. I wonder if gin back then had more caraway in it, or any. It's gonna be interesting to find out. And sweet fennel seed, which I believe I had just regular old spice jar stuff. And then we want 1 gram of that. I'm gonna add this to my mortar and pestle, break it up a little bit. I'm not trying to make like a, a paste or anything. Honestly, just opening up the juniper berries is probably enough. This is called a percolator or a dropping funnel, and it's almost certainly what J.F. Lyon would have used to make his extraction. Essentially, we can put our solvent and solute in here, which will be ethanol and the stuff we just crushed up. Let it sit for a week. His recipe says a week, and then strain it off and add it to some ethanol. So I'm gonna set that up, and then we'll check back in on this at the end of the episode. To set that up, the first thing we need is a cotton ball. 1 cotton ball. Not even the whole thing, just like a little bit of wadding. Poke that down in there a bit. This is called a wash bottle. I have a little bit of just Everclear in there, pure ethanol. And by pure, I mean 95%, because getting 100% is basically impossible. Just get in there. Just try not to be difficult. Thank you. And then a couple scoops of sand. Just sand. Just kind of really just enough to cover the bottom there. 80 milliliters of ethanol. I'm gonna take this guy, put it here. Grab my alley laboratory ethanol. That's really what this is, by the way. Everclear is mostly for lab work, in my opinion. It's about 80. We're gonna put our solute up in here. And the recipe did just say kind of crushed a little bit. It did not say it should be like a powder. And then I just take a couple squirts from this guy and rinse this out. Make sure all that stuff goes in there. Now the rest of the ethanol goes in. And now I'm gonna let that sit for a while. The one thing I will do is, I got these huge number 12 stoppers, and they just barely sit on top of those. Don't push them in, because you'll never get them out. But that will prevent the ethanol from just evaporating off in the air, and we can let that sit for like 5 days, a week, whatever. 24 hours would be typical, but with this particular recipe, it does say a week, but it also says don't crush that much. I bet if we had ground that into a powder, we could do this very quick, as opposed to letting it sit for a week. But we'll do it the J.F. Lyon way, and we'll just let that sit. So the second recipe, and the one that I think is certainly going to be the better of the two, but we'll find out when they're both done, is this redistilled gin. And that recipe is a little bit more involved, and it has instructions for how to distill it and how much to carry over and all of that. There was one thing in this recipe that jumped right out at me, and that is salt. There is a surprising amount of salt that goes into the still with the juice that you're going to redistill. Certainly that salt will not carry through the vapor path. It will be left behind, so I wanted to know why that was in there. I'm a member of Art of Drink's Patreon. Darcy O'Neill, who is Art of Drink, awesome guy. This is right up in his wheelhouse, pharmacy stuff, recreation of old recipes. And so I asked in his Discord what was about that. He said that it's just best practice. It helps salting out the parts you don't want. It also changes the boil temperature and stuff. He said that it increases yields. Basically, whenever he was distilling stuff like this professionally, and I'm paraphrasing here, Darcy, it was just considered best practice. So I said, okay, that makes a lot of sense. The other question is that you'll see that this recipe calls for corn spirit when it goes into the still. And I'm wondering about that, because everywhere else in the book, it talks about silent spirit, rectified spirit, etc. to mean the highest proof spirits you can get. Corn spirit, what does that mean? So first off, you can make neutral grain spirits from any grain, corn included. It depends on how, highly you distill that. If you get 95% ethanol out of corn, i.e. Everclear, it's going to taste like nothing. There will be no bourbony notes left in it, right? So it might mean that. It might just be that corn was the cheap way to make spirits. Probably that's true. The other thing I know in this recipe is that it calls for oil of turpentine. Don't buy turpentine and put that in your still. Turpentine historically would have been some essential oil pulled from pine, and its primary components would be alpha-pinene and beta-pinene and maybe some D-limonene and other terpenes. It's just a bunch of terpenes. And so I'm going to use a essential oil of pine. You can look at the safety data sheet or the GCMS, the gas chromatography, the analysis of it, and see that this is all alpha and beta pinene. This is the right stuff to be using here. The other thing I know in this recipe is that it does not include a dilution step. So I'm thinking that The fact that it's not silent spirit, it doesn't say rectified spirit. I am going to use a lower proof spirits in my still here because without a dilution step, I feel like that's the intention, that like what comes out of the still is done. Normally when you take spirits out of a still, whiskey, scotch, whatever, it is way too high proof for drinking and it ages and then, or whatever you're gonna do with it, infuses, blah, blah, blah. And then you add water to it before you sell it to people. I mean, maybe in this case, like the corn spirit is corn spirit because it's lower spirits and that's how it works. So 65% ABV is what I'm gonna use in my still. I suspect that this is his better gin, right? I'm literally looking forward to making this. We're gonna have to make it in the lab, so let's get to the lab now. So I need 800 mils of our corn spirit, which is what this is. That's what we're using it for. We're gonna add that to our 2,000 liter beaker. And now I need 350 milliliters of water. I am gonna put on gloves. Whenever I'm working with essential oils or isolates or any of these potent chemicals, I like to wear gloves. Not because they're toxic or anything like that, but because I don't want to deal with washing them off my hands. They're pretty powerful things. Some people ask me, where do you get essential oils and things like this from? These all came from Perfumer's Apprentice. If you're interested in doing work like this, I highly encourage you to go check out Art of Drink and Darcy O'Neill. Great guy, super duper informative. A lot of people ask me, do these things, are they food grade? I'm not the first person to tell you this. He would tell you this too. Food grade is not a legal distinction. It is a made up thing. What I will tell you is that all of these things have CAS numbers. Perfumer's Apprentice and New Directions Aromatics and any other reputable provider will have a GCMS and a safety data sheet and a CAS number and all of those things. And you will be able to go and look at the analytical analysis of the thing done on gas chromatography to see exactly what % of every ingredient is in there, and there's nothing else in there. That's it. And then you can check and see if any of those things are safe or all of those things are safe and whatever. And you can also look at the GRAS list, which is generally recognized as safe. There's a lot of different sources for that. But if it says food grade, that's not a thing. There are some things, like if it says perfumer's oil or perfumer's whatever, or for perfumes, even though Perfumer's Apprentice sells these, they also sell these. These are different ingredients. I think that there's a difference there. I would avoid that, and I will put information up on screen and in the a lot of people watch this show. A lot of people, here, you come up here. A lot of people watch How to Drink with their ears. There's a visual medium, there's a visual medium. So if I say something that doesn't sound right, look at the pictures. I might have corrected myself with the text on screen. So with that said, let's get started. Juniper oil, I want 1 milliliter of juniper oil. Half of a milliliter, 1.5 milliliters of the pine oil. Smells really good in here right now to me. 30 microliters of caraway, 15 microliters of sweet fennel oil. Now I'm gonna let that mix for a little while. Well, it's cloudy, but I think that's okay. And I think that that's why we're gonna distill it. All right, so this is mixed. What I wanna do now is portion it off because I have about 1,150 mils here. I'm gonna take out 450 milliliters and reserve it. And then I'm gonna add the other ingredients to this. So we'll just do that in 2 measures. 250-ish, and another 200, and I will reserve this for the time being. 2 more ingredients that go into this. One is salt, and the other one are these cardamom pods. Cardamom pods, definitely it's a flavorant, but it's interesting that we add them whole. Certainly he had access to all kinds of essential oils. My theory is that these are gonna double as bump chips so that we don't boil up our condenser when this is happening. I need 24 grams of salt for this, 24-ish grams of salt. Let that start stirring, dissolve that in. And now I need a very small amount of cardamom. I need 0.3 grams of crushed cardamom. It's less than 2 whole pot. All right, we're gonna do 0.5. I think it'll be fine. Yeah, we'll just break them up in my hand. While that was spinning, I started bringing out my distillation rig. What I found out is that even with my collection flask sitting all the way on the ground, with the condenser I have, it's not low enough. I have 2 choices. I can lift this up. I don't really have anything good to put it on, but I do have these 2 adapters. And with these 2 adapters, I can just make a much taller column like that and do it like this. We'll get a little bit more reflux or something, and then I can just lift this up and connect it there. I'm not going to vacuum distill this, but I will put vacuum grease on every joint so they don't leak, okay? Okay, so this guy is set to 70 degrees Celsius. It is slowly coming up to temperature. It is actively stirring itself. Let's see what happens. I do see just the beginning of some haze up here in the condenser, and we are at 70 in the boil flask here. I might click it up 1 degree or something like that, but honestly, I see steam rising up the column, so I think we're good. Column temperature is still at 21.6, but I don't know what I'm going to expect to see there anyway. Honestly, I think we could come up a bit. Maybe the water or something. Let's go to 75. So I had previously said this was going to work at 70 degrees Celsius. I was wrong. I don't know why I thought that. Pushing towards 80 now. I'm just going to keep increasing it. With the salt and the water in there, it's really hard to say exactly what the boil point's going to be. We're not there yet. We're seeing a little bit of vapor, just a little, not much, but I want to see like a sizzle boil down here. So I'm going to push it to 85 and see if that does it. We're about to get our first drops because we have lots and lots of reflux, I guess is what you would call that. Vapor climbing up on our column. The column temperature, the vapor path, is at 77.8. And yes, I am just starting to get condensate forming in the condenser. So, sucker's running. Oh, first drops. There they go. Wow. It's funny, you don't even see them running down the path. Neat. Here we go, making the stuff. So I'm a little bit perplexed because this distillation stalled for a minute because all the ethanol had been distilled and I collected it here. And the boil temperature in here increased when the ethanol came out, leaving this salty brine in here. And this wasn't set up to follow it. So now I've increased the temperature manually. It is at 101 degrees Celsius and we have a light simmer going on in there. Not an aggressive boil, but a healthy simmer. And here's where I'm a little bit confused because the recipe that I'm following said that basically you should start with 135 gallons and bring over 100 gallons through your still. Otherwise, the same recipe. I just made it a little bit smaller. The only reason I switched jars, and I am glad that I did, is because this stopped and it seemed like a good opportunity to do it. Now, what's in this jar is very high proof. I haven't tested it, but I'm sure it's very high proof, and it smells like a very good gin. What's coming out right now is probably very close to no proof, and it smells disgusting. It smells like tails. It smells like wet dog, mud, rot, shit farts. That's not right though, because what we started with was rectified spirit. This isn't some fermented mash where there's a bunch of fusel alcohols and methyl whatevers to be removed. That's already been done. Really all we're doing is filtering, in theory. And the salt and anything bad should be staying back there. You can't bring salt over on a still. So I don't know why that is. I'm glad this wound up being separate. I'm gonna keep going on it. We haven't hit our 100-gallon equivalent mark yet. That would be, this is not quite 300 milliliters. I should really get to like another 200, probably, milliliters of this if I was gonna try and hit that same thing. I may be losing some vapors, so maybe it's not exactly perfect, right? I don't know why this smells so bad. It shouldn't. There's no reason for it to be disgusting smelling. Really gross. Curious, very curious. This was an unexpected result. All right, I'm gonna call it. This stuff that's here, this was good distillate, and I'm going to see what I can do with this. It's my first go at this. I'm pretty happy with the result. I think we just made one wrong assumption that does not invalidate the rest of this at all, because this is exactly the product you would have gotten otherwise. It's just that we got less of it. That's all. I'm shutting it down. Okay, so it's been like a week, and this is our infusion for the compounded gin that's been sitting in this percolator ever since. I have these very large stoppers I put on top of these things when I do this. They're just big enough that I can pry them out, but they're important because the ethanol would totally evaporate if I left this thing open. There'd be nothing left. This looks well infused to me. I'm back in the bar instead of the lab because my still is still set up over there and I'm too lazy to break it down to finish this episode. So all we have to do is take our beaker and then we just open it up. There we go. And it'll start to run out. And if I take the top off here, it'll do even better because now there won't be a vapor lock. I also have a stopper with a hole in it that I will slip onto here and I'll pull this whole thing out with a vacuum using that, but it's not necessary for today. Now right away I'm noticing that this has a color to it. And it is possible that when we add this to ethanol, it will lose that color. It will dilute to the point where it's undetectable. I hope that that's true. He did not describe any process in his book to remove the color, so I'm just gonna do that. I'm just gonna put it into the ethanol, and whatever it is what it is. It is possible that he went through some polishing process to remove this color, but he didn't put it in the book. Now that we've got our extract, this next part is really easy. All I need is something to measure with, my base spirits, and some water. The perfect thing to do this measurement with is a 1 liter graduated filter. This is accurate to 3 milliliters, which is remarkably accurate for a graduated cylinder of this size, and some spring water and some Everclear. These are the things we need now. For this compounded gin, which is the quote English gin, it says that after we've got our extract, which we do, we need to add it to, 90 to 100 gallons, but we're not doing that because we're working small. We've downsized this whole thing. Add it to good corn spirit at 2 to 3 OP. What does 2 to 3 OP mean? It could mean a few different things, but at the time, OP, it means proof somehow. It either means 2 to 3 degrees over proof or 2 to 3 of proof. My research suggests it probably means 2 to 3 degrees of proof. Proof at that time was different than proof today. 1 proof today in spirits is a 0.5% ABV, and that's ABV is by volume. At the time of the olden days, it used an English system that was by weight, which is very different, and proof spirits, to be of proof, was not 50% ABV like we would kind of today, you would use that term. It was closer to like 56% or something like that, I think. And 2 to 3 degrees of proof would be roughly 58% ABV, maybe 58.3% ABV if you want to be really clear. So to make that, we're going to add to this 383 mils of water and 617 milliliters of our 95% Everclear, which should bring us to, 300 and 600 is 9. Well, yeah, we want 920 mils total. There you have it, 900. That's our of proof spirit. The only thing to add now is our extract. And we'll see, hopefully this color just disappears in the bottle. Already I'm seeing that it's taking on a bit of a yellowish hue. Oh, very much so. Does not look good. It needs to be stirred. It does not want to mix. Wow. All right. That sucks. Not thrilled with that. I wound up with 2 fractions. Now, I'm not accustomed to running a still, so this is all very new to me. I had the mantle set to the right temperature for it to boil off the ethanol. And when all the ethanol boils off, not all, but when the ethanol, a lot of it boils off, the boil point of the liquid in the boil flask jumps up, and I stopped getting vapor. My still stalled. Solution, of course, was to bring the temperature way up, and I just hadn't set it that way to do that. I had the good idea to take the fraction that had come off the still and put it away, and then put out another receiving flask and collect whatever came out afterwards. As I said, I started here from already rectified spirit. This was already clean to begin with. There was nothing bad in this at all. I would not have expected there to be, quote, tails, which is when you run your still too long and you start concentrating and collecting stinky bad things. But there were. This smells distantly like gin, but it also smells bad. It smells like stale, old, funky pool water cheese. I don't know. It's not good. There might be like a little bit of sulfurous notes in there, something like that. I don't know how that got in there. I don't know how we concentrated those smells. It's possible that there was some chemical change that happened in our essential oils and the extracts and the cardamom and all of that in the heat of the still. And that's actually one of the benefits of doing something under vacuum, is that because you're not actually heating anything, under vacuum you can use very little warmth to get it to boil. You don't actually cause any of the chemical changes that an ingredient might be subject to from heating. You avoid the heat. But what we wound up with, and I think this is even kind of better, are these 2 fractions. The stinky fraction, which I've done the math is lower proof, and the very nice smelling fraction. It smells like gin. Both of these are not ready for drinking yet. I thought I had a hydrometer around here somewhere so I could check the proof on these. I didn't. I did not, and I couldn't wait for one to show up in the mail. I do have a pycnometer, which honestly I think is probably more accurate than a hydrometer for this. You use a pycnometer. It is a very, very well measured volume. It uses this capillary cap on it to guarantee in this particular pycnometer that it is exactly 50 milliliters of liquid. So you take distilled water, you weigh that at the temperature that you're working, note that, then you empty it, you weigh this, you do the math, boom, you have your ABV, boom, you have your ABV. Because ethanol is less dense than water, you can calculate that. So this is about 79% alcohol by volume. This is about 21% alcohol by volume. I want to proof this down to bottling proof, something around 50%, exactly 50%. It is 79% ABV right now. If I add water to this at a ratio of 0.58, which means 100 milliliters of this, I would add another 58 mils of water. That will bring us to 50% ABV, which is, perfect bottling proof. Let me go grab a graduated flask and we'll do that up. Well, honestly, just to make my life easier, we're gonna stop at 250. We need 145 milliliters of water. Honestly, that's close enough for rocket surgery, that we're doing here. There we go. The water goes in, and now our distillate. And hopefully that cloudiness will disappear. Good. I was a little worried there for a second. How much left do we have? Because if this was a bit over 50%, I'm not going to be upset about it. In fact, it's probably period appropriate. An extra 15 mils. I'm just going to toss it in. There, now it's somewhere between 50 and 60% ABV. I'm excited. I'm finally going to get to taste this redistilled gin. And yes, I will taste also the funky tail. So I just did an episode where I went through, I think, 30 some odd gins and tasted them all. People asked me to do it, and so I did it. I ranked my gins, so my mind is fresh about my gin tastings. I still have my notes and everything like that. So I'm really excited to taste this gin that we just made, this redistilled gin. I will also taste the disgusting tail section and see what that's about. It's only something like 23% ABV. And this, the compounded gin that immediately loached and went really ugly. Addendum, I secretly had a second batch of that extract just in case things went awry, and noticed in the book that I was supposed to decant it and let it rest for 24 hours. Wasn't really clear on exactly what that meant because there wasn't a lot of details there, but after seeing this, I think I figured it out. So I decanted that into a separatory funnel and I stuck it in my fridge. It hasn't been 24 hours yet, but we're gonna give it a minute. What I think is going to happen happens, which is that the oils, the insolubles, will float to the surface. We should be able to separate that off with the separatory funnel and do that again and have a clear version of that as well later in the episode, in a day, when that's done. For now, let's taste this gin. Here we are, just enough to taste. So approximately somewhere between 50 and 60% ABV. Let's see, what is that nose? Definitely juniper. You would smell that and say, oh, that's a gin. You know what there is in there though? I think the pine notes are pretty strong. Definitely I'm picking up on the alpha pinene or beta pinene, whichever the pinene. Well, here we go. Whoa. That's gin. That is piney gin. That is an intense flavor. That is powerfully flavorful. It is definitely in the world of gin. It is a London dry gin through and through. It reminds me most strongly of the St. George Terroir gin. Oh, I'm picking up on the cardamom. That's what it was that was throwing me off. Big time cardamom. That's amazing. So anyway, it reminds me of the Terroir gin from St. George, not because it has the same exact juniper profile, but because it has the same level of intensity. This is crazy powerful gin. I don't know. It's just like, woo, pine and juniper and cardamom. Yes, that's a cool touch. Cardamom is a neat thing. Personally, if I was going to make my own, Orange Industries brand how to drink gin, I would probably put some orange in there. It has no orange notes in it at all. I would probably put in some orange peel or some lemon peel. I wouldn't mind having a little bit more citrus in there. This is straight pine, straight juniper, and I guess cardamom. I'm not picking up on the fennel or the caraway. I take it that they're in there. They're not picking up, but those three are big. I gotta say, it's a decent gin. This is a perfectly serviceable gin. I think that's pretty cool. Let's try the tails. This is much lower proof. It is also, and I don't know how much this is coming through on camera, it is a little hazy, a very slight haze. Let me see if this is visible on camera. Yeah, I don't think that's gonna show up, but to my eye, this hand has the tails. This hand has the gin. It's a little hazy, just a little. It's interesting. It smells better having, now there's like a fart note. It's got like a cabbagey kind of, yeah. It's funny, it's way less gross than I expected it to be. Oh, wow. Okay, so all the caraway is in here. This is super caraway heavy. That's funny. This essentially tastes like caraway flavored water. And there's no real funky stuff in there either, which is good. I would not expect there to be. I would not expect there to have tails. You know, I don't know what that is, what causes that, but like the cowling kind of flavor. In fact, this is kind of nice. And I do now wonder if the intention is for that to have been part of the final distillate, all these flavors, that there should not have been any fractioning. That said, I don't want the caraway in my gin, and I'm very happy to have fractioned that off. So yeah, and also whatever haziness is happening there, we don't need that in our gin. Our crystal clear gin is much more appealing to me. And about that crystal clear gin, so this is the compounded gin that has gone, I mean, completely loached. That would be very difficult to fix at this point. You would have to just distill it, and then you would be clear again. Like I said, I have a batch running right now in the separatory funnel, and if it separates like it should, or could, then we will end up with a clear bottle of this by the end of the episode. Now, one thing about this might have been perfectly suitable if you were serving people and they didn't see where it was coming from, pre-mixed gin bucks. Something in like a ginger beer, or I mean, in a ginger beer for sure, but any kind of a cloudier, more natural ginger type drink. Who would know? That said, here we go. Compounded ugly. Gin nose. Smells like gin. Honestly, the distilled stuff has a much more clean aroma, much more pine, much more, I mean, it smells much more like a London Dry. It tastes like gin. Oh, it's weird. It's got a sweeter finish. That's probably the Fennel. I vastly prefer the distilled gin. This certainly reads as gin, and it would mix fine in a ginger ale. But given my druthers, I'd prefer this one. Not only is it more attractive, I'm not a big fan of the Fennel and caraway notes that wound up in this, to be honest, and I'm kind of glad that they fell out of the distilled gin. Fun stuff! This is actually super interesting and super informative. I might keep working on this, and if I do, that information, those updates will probably wind up on Patreon. I can't stress this enough, guys, and I hate to have to stress this, but this show is not possible without the support of patrons. The days of yore are gone, and YouTube revenue is not going to be sufficient to keep a show like this that takes as much time from as many people going as it used to. It just doesn't work anymore. Happily, I have a wonderful community on Patreon that are dedicated apparently to making this show possible. It is humbling. I can't comprehend it, but thank you. I can't thank you all enough. And if you love this show, I implore you, please check out my Patreon. Maybe there's something over there that'll be worth your while. And if there is, I will see you in our private Discord where we will have our Secret Santas. There are happy hours. You will get access to the HTD app that makes using the show as your personal cocktail guide and tracking your personal ingredient inventory and making your favorite drinks and all of those things so much easier. There's going to be behind the scenes content. You'll get access to my random thoughts at midnight on our private Discord and so much more. And I don't know if you know this or not, but we now have HTD Shop, just to finish this thought, where you can get all of these really cool pins we're designing. This is the Customer's Always Wrong skull pin. We have a collection of assorted how to drink sort of in-joke coasters. Patrons at the $10 level will be getting codes for free pins every quarter. So if you don't mind, just take a look at the Patreon, see if there's anything over there that is worth it for you. And if there is, I will see you in the Discord. And to the people who have been supporting this show for so long, thank you. I can't do this without you. Now that I've got the Prohibition era Bootlegger gin, I can do the thing I've been extremely excited about doing this whole time, which is make a period-appropriate gin buck. I mean completely period-appropriate. That's what's so cool about this. What's in my pocket? Oh, my jigger. What have I got in my pocket? It's seeds. It's a perfectly acceptable question. We hate spagances. Okay, to do this, I need, just as a reminder, I previously uncovered and recreated the recipe for Canada Dry ginger ale as it would have been made in the 1920 in Prohibition. I have some of the syrup for it here. Take a 7-to-1 pour of seltzer, and I'm leaving myself plenty of room for gin. So 7 parts seltzer. There you go. 1. There you are. So a bit more than a finger, something like that. 2-ounce slug of gin. Hopefully I have room. Ooh, nailed it. Give that a little stir. There's an interesting sort of opalescence to it. Maybe a twist of lime if we were feeling fancy. And by twist of lime, I mean a squeeze of lime juice. Think about how this would have been made in a speakeasy in Prohibition. Just kind of on the fly. And here we are. The Texas Guinan Victor Lyon Gin Buck from 1920 Dickety-2. Let's give the little girl a great big hand. It's interesting. It really brings the caraway up. I don't love that gin in that ginger ale. I thought that gin was very interesting on its own. I am not in love with it now. Oh, wow. I mean, with some more ice, if it was colder. Unfortunately, hold on. I'm just going to give that a second to chill it. Let's try it a little chilled. I mean, the seltzer was already cold, but I guess my gin was so, like 2 ounces of room temperature gin really did bring up the temperature a lot. It is better that way. I still don't love the caraway notes. I am not a fan. They are caraway, fennel. I don't know. It's got some stuff in there I'm not in love with. Yeah, not in love with that. Let's try it with the gin that I'm gonna like even less, the compounded gin. What a disappointing thing, you know? So much work to finally try this drink and just be like, ah. I suspect it would go better in a spicier ginger ale, but this is the ginger ale they were using. I'm actually just going to drink this down a little bit just to try and get the ginger ale flavor right. We want the Uggo stuff. Well, you know, the funny thing is, they really look pretty similar once they're mixed up. I think you'd have a hard time telling the difference between these two, visually. So maybe it was made that way, just real ugly. Even more caraway. Woo! Twist the lime, please. Squeeze the lime. Maybe even 2 of those. Ay. Also, these probably would have had a cherry. Every cocktail seems to have gotten a cherry back then. That'd be nice. Cherry on this? Sure. Well, the lime, extra lime juice really does help it. It brightens it up. It covers up some of the caraway notes. I don't like the caraway. I don't know why that would be in there. I would, disinclude that entirely. I do wonder if that's how gin tasted. Maybe London Dry Gin or gin of that time frame, I don't have enough historic recipes to know, had caraway and fennel in it. Maybe it was much more spicy herbed. I don't like it, but that may be because I have a very modern expectation and palate for what gin should taste like. I don't like that at all. That said, I do wonder how this gin would be in a martini. It has such a bracing, potent flavor that making it in a fairly wet martini with a heavy pour of vermouth, it's an interesting prospect to me. I will do that as a short, just out of curiosity, but not here. Hi, obviously you're not used to seeing me like this. This is what I look like when I am not doing the show, even though I am now currently doing the show. I had to follow through on the addendum with the second extraction. Right now, the studio is kind of a mess. I'm working on a whole series of episodes about cocktail cherries, so they're all over the place. But this has been sitting in my fridge for over a week now. This is my separatory funnel that I put that second extraction in, and it was only supposed to take 24 hours, and I kept checking on it, and it wasn't done, and there was very small amounts of precipitation on it, and I wish I had grabbed a camera and done anything with that information, because what I did not know is that it had a very slow leak. And so now you can see all the precipitation that is held onto the side, and even there's some like clogged up in here. So it was working. It was working much slower than 24 hours, and I have nothing to show for it. But what I can tell you is that that compounded gin definitely could have been made in such a way that it would not have loached, and maybe even would be totally colorless with a little bit more work, but it doesn't take 24 hours, it takes longer than that. Okay, thanks. Even though I find the actual gin buck to be a pretty serious letdown, it was an enormous amount of fun to get here. Surprise, 3-part series. I had no idea I was doing this. To wind up with our period-appropriate ginger ale, period-appropriate gin, and finally be able to make this period-appropriate gin buck. I think if this is what people were drinking in speakeasies, I would have drank something else. Maybe I just hang out with the jazz band or something. Yeah. Oh boy. I'd be curious about some Prohibition era whiskey. I'm sure that would be terrible. But this was awesome. I was super thrilled to do this. This was a lot of fun. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with me on this How to Drink adventure. I will see you guys next time on another HTD. Until then, please like and subscribe. Apparently those things matter. And good night and good luck. Here's to you. It's growing on me. It's growing on me. It's a little turpentine. It's a little turpentine.